My name is Claire Vanderwalt, originally Belanger, the fourth of the Belanger family. I was the youngest. Well, this is the 100th anniversary of Belanger's presence in Kenora. My parents came, I think it was 1923. My father was a paper maker. He worked in the paper mills in Iroquois Falls and Espanola, where he met my mother. My mother was from Buckingham, Quebec. They were both French speaking and they didn't learn English till they were about 16, but they ended up speaking really quite well. And they were so keen on learning good English that they wouldn't speak to us in French, so we missed out on learning French. So I'm the first generation since 1653 or 36 or something, when the first Belangers came to Canada, that doesn't speak French, which is a shame, really. And my dad was working in Espanola and he married my mother there. She was young, 19, I guess, when she got married. And they were building mills all over the place. And he had a choice going to Corner Brook, Newfoundland, or to Thunder Bay. And he decided to go to Thunder Bay, but when they got there, the mill was being built in Kenora. So he decided to come here. So I guess it must have been one of the first, either the mill was just opening or it just opened. But one of the places they lived in near the creek was very dirty and they were cleaning it up and he got typhoid. And he was very, very ill and he was in hospital for quite a while. My oldest brother Jerry had just been born and he was really, really ill. And he was in the hospital for a long time, but he recovered very well. I guess it was just before I was born they moved to the house here on 4th Street North. So they'd been living here before I was born. So I hadn't lived anywhere else. And they had the house, the family had the house for 60 years. And it was sad to sell it, but it was time to go. When I was about 6, my mother wanted it fixed up, because it was an old house by then. These houses are old. I don't know when they were built originally, but the basement was sort of earth and there's a big rock. We were able to put cement on part of it, but they were just renting it. And then the Depression came. My dad was out of work for quite a few years, and he and Jack Deno used to go to Hay Island and cut wood, and they fished and they picked berries, and he worked on the highway. And they managed to get through to the end of the Depression. I don't know how many years it was, 2 or 3 years anyway. But by that time they'd used up all their savings and they had been saving to buy the house. And then the house went up for sale. My mother panicked because she wanted to buy that house. So she let the hose run in the basement so it would be good and wet so no one would buy it. And it worked, so nobody bought it, so they were able to get it eventually. In those days, I think she said they paid about $1,500 for it, but they never got mortgages. They just saved up enough money and paid cash for houses in those days. I didn't know that. When I was little, we had, like they think now it's a great thing now, they order their groceries online, but they always bought groceries that way. There was, they call the grocery and they deliver, and we had a bread man, a milkman, an ice man. Oh yeah, Farmer McGregor from Rabbit Lake. And he used to come to the house with chickens, but they weren't, they still had all their guts inside, so that's what we used to do, eviscerate the chickens and get a candle to burn the feathers off. And he used to bring us eggs, but you always just put money in the milk bottle, put it outside, and in the winter there was 2 or 3 inches of cream sticking up on top, frozen like a popsicle. We used to like to get, when the Iceman came along, of course, we didn't have refrigerators when I was a kid, so we never had ice cream. So what we thought was a great treat, we'd climb on the back of the wagon, the ice, the horse, the coal and the ice, and that was all delivered by wagon and horse then. And we would get a piece of mill paper and wrap these chunks of ice, little chunks of ice we'd find, we'd sit and suck that. We thought that was a great treat. There's one good thing about having your father as a paper maker was they had to take samples from every roll, or it was newsprint they were making. It was all folded up almost like a book. And we always had tons of paper, so we always had everything to draw on, and to line drawers, and to and to paint and make books. And we were never short of paper when we were kids. I had lots of paper. Yes, so this is a trip down memory lane of the old black lane where I spent a lot of my youth playing. And this was what we call the back bush, which is all gone. And when I see this part that's all gone, was the only spot in the back bush where you could find some blueberries. Farther down there's lots of pin cherries and choke cherries and hazelnuts, but this was the only blueberry spot. I think that's and I was heartbroken. Of course, it was many years after I moved away to find out that they put a fence here. And I thought that was terrible because this was such a wonderful place for us to play when we were kids. Just cut down trees and make some stilts and make huts, and it was a great place to play. And I guess this was Ratchford's place. And old Charlie had a great big workshop there. I don't know if that's what it was, but they fixed that house up really nice. And this was I learned how to ride a bicycle. In wartime, you couldn't buy a bicycle. So the Frasers lived next door to us, and they had some boys' bicycles. So we learned by putting one leg underneath the bar and trying to balance going down this hill. Well, there was quite a few accidents, but we did learn, so all was not lost. And this was McCann's. They were very close friends for many years. And McDonald's next, and in between was sort of a lane before, and there was a dance studio where I took tap dancing lessons. B. McDonald was a teacher. I don't know if that was still it, or was it made into a garage, I don't know. Old Mrs. McDonald was a great lady. She used to let me in her back door all the time and sit on her back kitchen steps and eat cookies. And I was reading a poem by Millie Ratchford once, and she also mentioned Mrs. McDonald, who was taught to all kids like an adult and was always there for us. The McDonald girls I married with the Duggans, so that was I first knew Jerry Duggan here when he was about 12, I guess. Yes, there used to be some big caragana trees here. Don't see them now. And of course, this is the Belanger garage. Isn't it beautiful? That's an oldie for sure. From way back when they built the road. I'm surprised it's still standing because it's been falling down ever since I can remember almost. And this is my backyard. It used to be a big garden. My parents were wonderful gardeners, prize from the fair in gladiolas and all the vegetables, but for some reason it looks much smaller to me now than it used to be. And my dad had a greenhouse there, but the house doesn't look too bad. Those are asbestos shingles on it, and they last forever, I guess, because that's been there since about 1937, those shingles, and they still look pretty good. But there was always lots of flowers, dahlias, pansies, everything. And the cross between the front and backyard was a trellis with an archway. And all the time I was a teenager, every time I went through there, I'd jump up and grab it and chin myself. I always think of that when I go by there. I couldn't do that now. And back here was where the main path was through to the mill. There was a lot of choke cherries and pin cherries. And my mother used to get tin cans and just strip them all, and my mother would make jelly from them. I used to bring my dad's lunch or supper in the good season, in the summer. And we would just walk through the bush, walk across the mill yard, climb up the fence like a ladder to get into just walk right by all the big machines. Nobody seemed to care if you walked into the mill and walked up and down the big rollers of paper. And I'd go to my dad's office and bring him his lunch. And he would have what we had for supper, a hot casserole or something. And that went on for a long time. I don't think we did it in the winter time though. And about here was a path that went another way into the bush. And Blackie and his friends, when they were young, maybe 12, 13, I guess, maybe a little older, they built a shack in there. It was really great. It was quite big, had bunk beds, had a tank on the roof. They had a shower. They'd fill it with a hose and they'd put, the shower had a concrete floor. I don't know how come it got torn down, but it was there for quite a while. It was well done. When we were little, we didn't know what a cesspool was. And this house was an old house and it hasn't been connected to the sewers. And the cesspool ran out here and we thought, well, all this nice yellow ice to play on. Until we told my mother we were playing, she really had a fit. So, but there's some very nice like rock cliffs going down there that we used to play in that go down to the mill lawn down there. And we played there quite a lot. Now I can vaguely remember, and I think about it a bit, when I was small, someone was going to build a house here. And they had dug a basement. And it was like a big gravel pit there. And all the kids on the street, I was too little to take part, but they had a circus. Millie Ratchford was the fortune teller. And I don't remember what all the kids did for tricks or something, but they had popcorn and it was quite successful. And this yard is beautiful now. It was just lawn before. And Mr. Frayne, he never threw the kids off his lawn. We could play British Bulldog on his lawn. He was very, very good to the children in the neighborhood. Nice old man. He was the one responsible for Kenora having the nicest railway station in the country. He liked gardens, and now is a parking lot and a big mess, but it was beautiful. I guess up until after the war. Before the war, it was all gardens, and then behind it, going up to Bathurst Street, I guess, like a wall. It was all petunias, and it was really beautiful. And now it's nothing, just a bunch of weeds. But this house has really been looked after and perked up. It looks really great. And this is the Barry house. They've renovated it really to the nth degree. It's really fantastic what they've done to it. Spent a lot of time here. In the original house there was a double-story screen porch there, and you had a door out there, and they used to sleep out there in the summer. But they put it all new, and everything's new. It's just fantastic what they've done with that building. Oh, that is gorgeous. That is really beautiful. And this triangle of grass used to be much bigger, and is what we call the boulevard. And that was Mr. Frayne's pet, and he had an immaculate grass, and he used to stand out there and water it every night with his big bulldog with him. And he always kept it watered and immaculate. And after he left, it was no longer kept up. And that little house over there was mine at one time. When we first got married in '59, we bought that house for $5,000. And we rented it for about 10, and then we sold it for $10,000, so that was pretty good. But they've put all, it looks like I've got new siding. They fixed it up quite a bit. It looks really nice. And this duplex had many different tenants over the years. There was Saunders, there was Stevens, there was Limericks and Rivers. And then there's my house. Oh, those trees are so big. They were just tiny little when they put there. And I remember when my dad built this wall. And Jamie put basement stairs. It just seemed so much smaller. The yard just seemed so much smaller. At the front was a big garden, and my dad liked petunias. He thought it should have been Canada's national flower because it bloomed so well in the summer. He always, underneath all the windows were big window boxes full of petunias all summer. And I never knew that gas thing was there because it was always a big garden of flowers there. Originally in the house it was a great big wood stove, wood furnace. And that was one of our jobs, is to throw the wood in the basement. They'd deliver quite a few cords. A big saw thing would come along and saw it all up and chop it all up, and then we would have a chute that went into the basement, and that was our job, to throw all the logs down and then pile it up in the basement. And then we changed to coal for a very short time. And then when I was about 16, I think, my dad, I think, was the first person in the town who was willing to go and try an oil furnace. And I think oil was 16 cents a gallon. That was a nice old house. It was remote. The original house had a big veranda at front that was really nice, and I don't know, they figured they'd modernize and they tore that all down. But I have a favorite picture when it was a veranda and the big steps there. And all the kids on 4th Street North. I was a baby sitting on my sister's knee. And it was all the Ratchford kids, Georgie Dumford, who I guess came the town telephone guy. He was just little with a mop of blonde hair. And there's about 10 kids sitting on the front steps, my brothers and sister, and that's a very favorite picture. And the Frasers lived there for a long time next to us. J.V. Joe and Estelle Marilyn. So, and these old Manitoba maples have been here before. They're older than I am. There was more of them, but they've cut them all back, but they keep growing. I guess you can't kill a Manitoba maple. And this is the front of McDonald's, and they had an old Auntie McDonald she was very old, and she sat in her rocking chair in the porch for years, and then she was finally went to St. Joseph's Hospital, and they looked after her after that. There was no such thing as an old folks home in those days because I guess nobody lived that long. My house that I bought before me belonged to old Mr. Stokes, and he was an old plumber contractor. And he had always lumber and sand and all kinds of junk at his yard. Used to drive my mother crazy. But we loved it because he was always a big sand pile to play in. And he had a parrot. And then after the Bushes bought it, that was Bill Bush, shoe store's uncle or something. And they lived there for a while. That's who we bought it from when they died. And down there with a red roof, hey, that looks nice, that red roof. That was Hendrickson's. Selena, Bubbles, and Rita, and I've always called Bubbles Bubbles because I remember when she was born she looked like the baby Bubbles. That was the doll rage of the time. Her name was Helen, but she was one of my partners when we traveled Europe in the 50s, hitchhiking. Before McCann's lived here, it was Grandma Ratchford, like the Ratchfords were next door, and this was, and I can remember seeing her standing there. She was a tall, really, really elderly with an apron on, and she was always watering her. She had a nice garden there. It was tiger lilies. And then this house was built by the Bergmans, Bergman and Nelson Bergmans. And when Gary Bergman, the hockey player, was so little, he used to come here often and play in the street, ride his bike up and down. And next to Bergman's was, that was the Wilson's house. Then my brother, we played there a lot because where Blackie's house was a great big lawn and all trees and a big oval driveway. It was very beautiful. Then there's the rocks that go down to the street, and we call those Wilson's Rocks, and we used to play there. And behind the house, they had a thing for two runners to drive your car on so you could work underneath. and work on your old cars. And that was a good place to play too. And then after the war, my brother bought this house. Jerry lived there for a while. And then Blackie got the other half and built his house and when he got married, he moved into it. And now it's really strange because Ella Fraser lives there. So it's made the full loop. Another Fraser back on the street, which is good. And where the Walford Arms is was Ratchford's yard, and Jimmy and Tommy Ratchford were trained in fancy skating. Old Charlie had them going to Winnipeg and Thunder Bay, and they took fancy skating lessons for years. And they did a lot of entertaining at the winter carnivals. They put on a show, and their mother used to make their costumes, and they were really good. Oh, Jimmy could spin as well as Kurt Browning, I would say. And they could do all kinds of fancy things, and they put on quite a show. And when Tommy was little, his dad used to teach him geography when he was maybe 6 or 7 years old. And he knew all the countries of the world and all the capitals, and he was on the radio, like one of the quiz kids. And Charlie had a rink there every year, so his boys could practice their skating. And he would keep it watered, and of course all the trees around would be like a fairyland of ice. But no one was allowed to skate on it but them. That was their private rink for them to train on. The one over there, that was Finch's house. And I don't know too much about, I mean, they're down there. There was Mr. Hall's house, and Newman's, Milton's, Greenslade's. That's the end of 4th Street North. I don't know the other end. Then you get down to the north end. But this was my stomping grounds, this piece here. This, you can see the rock cut here. This was a little bit higher. And when they first paved the road, I can remember the jackhammers and the guys when one guy holds the spike and the other guy hits it with a sledgehammer. And they blasted it part of the way before they did the road. But before that, it was really good for sliding. And of course, there wasn't much traffic then, so Blackie was always inventing something, and he would take a great big long plank, 2x6 or 2x8, I guess, and get two little sleighs, and he'd have the front and the back, both of them together, and everybody on the street could get on this thing and slide down all the way to the ride out at night, after supper in the winter. Of course, at the bottom of the hill was across the road was a rink, outdoor rink. My mother would put I'd be maybe 6, 7, my mother would put my skates on at the house, and I'd go down the hill in my skates. So, anyway, I guess that's quite a few memories for one day.